Our project we're working with is organic solutions and hydroponic systems. So we're working with comparing an actual fertilizer that's typically sold in the industry for hydroponic systems and seeing if we could actually do a on-site, what we call biofertilizers. So these are fertilizers that we could create, simple processes that any handler of hydroponic systems could be able to make. But what we're including is an extra level of biology, which is not really found present in your standard hydroponic system. So the difference with ours is that we're making it based off vermicompost, and this is essentially castings, which is just poop from worms. But our worms are breaking down organic food waste that's contributed by us. We essentially make these huge liquid, you can call them extracts, but the same way it works to brew tea at home, we're doing this in 30-gallon water gallon drums, and we're making this brown, rich, nutrient-rich liquid fertilizer. So where we started, we essentially collected all our organic compost that we needed, the vermicompost, the regular compost, and then we needed just an extra bit of nutrients that we could add to the solution itself. And we had a blend of fish emulsion and molasses. So this is essentially just the recipe we needed for our blend, and we were going to find that after 24 hours we have our optimum brown fish-smelling fertilizer. It wasn't that bad, but if you work with a lot of compost teas, after a while you're just really excited and it's kind of aroma sketchy, really intrigued about it. The plants themselves, we're using green oak leaf lettuce. This is kind of seems to be a standard right now as far as lettuce production goes in hydroponic systems. Pretty much started with having chronic disease. At some point after college, after high school, I had to become bedridden. I had to cancel my first semester of actual college because of my symptoms. I was having points where I just couldn't digest food well, and I was at a point, my energy were just depleted. I was lethargic, and I was just losing weight, and just because of the ways I wasn't able to process food anymore. And of course, the idea of what food was what I always had known: eating a lot of junk food, eating a lot of processed foods. Strictly, lots of starches and meats, and just sticking to anything else that's processed. Of course, I was going through the regular medical routes of, pharmaceutical prescriptions, which initially were, it was not clear that they were doing much, but just started reading a book about intestinal healing through diet. So it's a pretty new concept in the sense that we can, use food as, healing ourselves from the inside. Ever since that point, my mom read about this book, and so she started implementing, really whole foods diet. I was still eating meat, but I was eating way more veggies as much as I could. So I started to eat this, and I started feeling a little better. I could start to digest foods, but to the point where I was able to say, okay, I'm going to stop taking these steroid injections that I was told I would need for an undisclosed amount of time because I had a chronic disease. Reading and furthering my involvement and my sense with eating these foods and healthy foods, and realizing principles of detoxing, de-inflammatory foods, high antioxidant foods, nourishing yourself or at least myself, on a level that was unheard of ever before, and feeling these benefits and feeling this energy coming back to my life, and this whole sense of revelation of this lifestyle change. Once the point that I was able to come back to school, I re-enrolled in school, but I also actually enrolled in a culinary arts program. As my mom was teaching me about this whole intestinal healing, I went out of my way to also start cooking, because I felt like, the only power I had was to develop what was going in me and nourishing me at that point. Going into that, I was enrolled in this program that eventually had an extended connection to a small startup farm. Initially, the point where I started to visit the garden was just based off of credit opportunities, extra credit for students to go help and volunteer, because some of the salads that he was growing were going to our sous chef class. So that was pretty cool. And we were harvesting from this garden, and at that point, the first time I ever got to this garden, and we all had our own lettuce to choose, and I harvested it myself and had my hands in the soil and uprooted this lettuce head.
it was, that was the revelation at that point. I felt that there was something, as I said, intuitive about the experience that I felt, that I was beginning to have more control of the foods I was eating. I mean, from the root ground beginning, from seed to root. All of a sudden I was into gardening, which before I was just playing video games and, having a pretty standard, domesticated life out here.
Makes all the right sounds. It's not bitter at all. Says the guy growing his own lettuce. No, it's actually really flavorful. I mean, just what I would expect it to be. Just a water-filled, lettuce tasting. Seriously, not bitter at all. Really good.
Yeah.